All right. All right. We are live. And on today's episode, alongside guest host Bianca Léger, we interview the founder of Realmushrooms, who just celebrated their 6th year in business, bringing pure 100% organic mushroom extracts without any grain fillers to the masses. Welcome to the winner circle, Skye Chilton.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Bianca. Super happy to be here.
We're very grateful to have you on. And this is a very uplifting, inspiring, empowering podcast. And the first question is a real light one. And that's coming to you now. And that is, what do you love about your world right now, Skye?
That's a good question. I guess I love getting to talk to amazing people every day. So that's like one thing. Being in a industry where we get to help people is always just amazing there too. Like just some of the feedback that we see from our customers is I can't make the stuff up. I can't like try and envision how someone is going to feel from mushrooms, but like just to get that coming in on a day-to-day basis always feels like you're doing something right, and getting to work with other practitioners and other businesses of like constantly meeting new amazing people. And certainly like working in the health space when you know like you're having an impact on people's daily health.
Right on. Thank you for sharing that. Another question that we like to ask all guests at the start of the podcast, just to kind of get to know them better and for our listeners to get to know them better, is their mission. Their mission here in this reality plane. Like all companies, like your company, Realmushrooms, has a mission, and different organizations have missions. But we as humans ought to have our own guiding North Star that leads us in all that we do, whether that be personal, professional, and everywhere in between. So what would be your personal mission currently in this reality, Skye?
Wow, personal mission. I guess that's sort of constantly evolving, I would think.
Yeah, of course.
And right now, I think it's a lot about learning and education, constantly, pushing myself to whether it's do new things or learn new things or get, it could be even like getting a bigger audience, but and even, I think the last 10 years of my life have really been focused around health and well-being and trying out a lot of things and kind of bringing my own health back into harmony, whether it's just eating better, exercise, even, like the mental side of things, kind of done a lot of stuff in the self-development space, and then, even getting into like meditation and having coaches and things around that. So a lot of stuff around self-improvement and continual improvement. I think certainly, watching my dad now, who's 73, and just seeing him being alive with life, and he's, got constantly learning something new every day, or has something that's like he wants to pursue, and you can see that just keeps him going. And I think that desire for continual learning is something that really helps us keep going long term. And certainly having the necessary kind of foods and ingredients and whatever you're putting in your body and exercise around that to kind of nourish that, to make it a lot easier for ourselves, will certainly help.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. It really all ties in, because you're working so closely with the mushrooms to also help us kind of bring most optimal state of being within our bodies. I'm curious as to, are you currently studying anything new concerning mushrooms in that field? Is there something specific that you're kind of exploring right now that maybe we don't know about yet?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we just put out a video on our YouTube channel about ergothioneine. So ergothioneine is it's an amino acid that is in all of these mushrooms, but it's also found throughout our entire body. And right now they're looking at it as a longevity vitamin. So preliminary studies, they're seeing that as we age, this compound it shows up less and less in our bodies. And then that ties into some of the studies around mushroom consumption, where they show that people who consume mushrooms generally have better health outcomes or lower rates of cognitive decline. And that could be related to this compound or some of the other more specific compounds that are in mushrooms. So that's certainly one of the things that's on my mind. And we're looking in a number of different areas, always kind of trying to keep our finger to the pulse of certainly what's happening in Asia, where that's definitely driving the medicinal side a lot of the times, where are there new mushrooms that are being cultivated? Certainly, like we're seeing the cauliflower mushroom, which is just amazing to find out in the Pacific Northwest. It seems very elusive and it's really amazing to eat. But that's, starting to be cultivated on a bigger scale in China. The morel mushroom is one that has another good body of research where, in China, they've cracked the code on growing it. And I think it's taken 60 plus years for them to really do it and start to like push the scale of it. So now it's, they're growing a lot of them over there, and, that could be a product offering at some point. But all of these, mushrooms are really kind of modulating our immune systems and helping our bodies. And I know, lots of people get locked onto lion's mane in terms of kind of like the neurological health. But I find it interesting that other mushrooms show similar things. There's a interesting study, I think it was out of South Korea, on tremella mushroom, which showed cognitive enhancing opportunities. So is there commonalities across all these mushrooms where we should just be eating them all the time, like no matter what, and not focusing on certain ones for certain things, but maybe getting a more broad spectrum approach? I'm not sure, but and then like vitamin D is another big one too. Like we've got a vitamin D based mushroom product where, even if you just buy mushrooms from the grocery store, you can just slice them up, put them out in the sun for 20 minutes, and that'll drastically increase the amount of vitamin D2 there. So mushrooms contain a compound called ergosterol, which is similar to our cholesterol. And when you expose that to UV light, it converts it into vitamin D2. So you can get a high amount of vitamin D from your mushrooms just by sticking them out in the sun for 20 to 30 minutes. So that's an easy way if you want to get some natural vitamin D in your system.
Yeah. So that's with any type of mushroom. We can do that. Just take the mushroom, put it on the side where there's light, and let it absorb for a while and then eat it.
Yeah, usually just the culinary ones. So the fleshier mushrooms typically have higher amounts of ergosterol, and that's going to be what converts over. Some of the polypores, like a reishi or something, not so much.
Okay.
But you're probably not going to try and eat those ones.
Yeah. Well, I don't really know where to get just fresh reishi around here either. Don't they just grow in China?
There's lots of local reishi in North America.
Okay.
If you just head out into the forest, I'm not exactly sure which species are back east, maybe Ganoderma sugi, or I think maybe there might be hemlock reishi out there, which is, I think they call it yellow reishi. Out here we get Ganoderma organensis, and then there's the artist conch, Ganoderma applanatum, which is more, it doesn't have that red sheen to it, but it's kind of dark, but you can actually draw pictures on the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So you can see like a lot of like reishi art you can find where people just draw these like beautiful little paintings on the spore layer of these reishi.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. I'm curious, how does the mushrooms that are growing here compare with the ones traditionally grown in China?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be similarities. Kind of like we were talking before the show, is like it comes back to, there's a lot of the strain matters, like the species matters, the food that you give the mushrooms matters. So in China, they're growing all the reishi on a single wood log, just because it has a lot more nutrients for the mushroom compared to like, say, growing it on a sawdust substrate or a grain substrate, because you can grow mushrooms on pretty much anything, coffee grounds, sugar cane, which makes them just really amazing foods to where you could take them to almost any place in the world, because every location has some sort of agricultural biomass or bio waste. If you look at, who knows, like grain husks or down south, there's lots of sugarcane, and maybe like the Caribbean or something like that, where they harvest a lot of sugarcane, and there's bio waste from that you can use and just grow mushrooms on it. So pretty much anywhere has some sort of agricultural waste to grow mushrooms, but definitely the right substrate with the right nutrients will offer the proper food for these mushrooms to grow better. And that can even be manipulated too for, producing more of certain compounds, where you can manipulate the substrate. So the cultivation is going to come down to species, strain within the species. So some of them, so just for example, in China, they grow a couple different, there's probably multiple strains of reishi that they're growing. So in China, the reishi spore powder is really popular, and they use a specific strain of reishi for that produces tons and tons of spores. Typically it's like a smaller cap, but you can end up with maybe like an inch or so of spores on the top of this cap. And then there's other ones that they can grow for like a higher triterpene content, other ones for, higher amounts of beta glucans. So there's kind of a lot of variance depending on what the outcome you want is, which makes it kind of interesting and like special at the same time, just how much is actually out there and how much we still don't know.
Yeah. So let's hit a rewind button and let's just trace the origins to your interest in mushrooms. And I'm sure your father, Jeff, has played a big part in that, as he's very prominent in the mushroom sphere. But let's hear it from your words. How did your interest for mushrooms become birthed? And talk to us about the creation of Realmushrooms now in its 6th year.
Sure.
And how that came to be.
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting, because I guess I wouldn't call myself a fungophile like right off the bat. It was something that I was always around with my father. He had multiple different businesses while I was growing up that were about mushrooms, and so I kind of knew about it. He would take us out foraging in the woods, so I knew how to identify certain mushrooms. But it was never something where it was like, yeah, I'm going to do this when I grow up, or I don't know. It was strange, because I knew my dad had a business on it. I helped him in the business. He had me doing odds and ends while I was like in elementary school and high school, kind of helping him out. But it never seemed like, I don't know, didn't seem like a career in a sense. And it wasn't until, let's see, because like when I was a kid, I wanted to be like a computer programmer of some sort. I wanted to make video games, and so I went into university and took computer science and ended up with a computer science and math degree, and then started working in kind of tech related stuff, and I was in healthcare for a while, and then ended up starting another business with some friends. And that was when I started reconnected with my dad a lot over business, and we I saw like everything that he did while I was growing up that I just had zero awareness about, and early sacrifices, and him just like doing whatever it took to make things work, and a lot of early hard work before anything really paid off, and so that I learned a lot about his business and his kind of his own introduction to mushrooms, and it was just like, wow, this is just really amazing, and it's like, it's a great product, and everything we're doing here is really good, and we're helping people, and so eventually my other business at the time was just kind of falling apart and kind of shutting it down, and so my dad and I were talking for a while, and I was like, we should really do something in the public space, because he had always been in the background more or less as a business supplier of raw ingredients. So companies would use his mushroom extracts in finished products that you would see on the store shelves, but nobody aside from maybe businesses really knew about his company, Nammex. And so I've kind of knew more of like the front end kind of e-commerce tech side, email, all the kind of new age kind of stuff that he wasn't doing at the time. And so I was like, hey, maybe we need a new product line that's kind of forward facing, and we're going to talk directly to consumers, because that was always a challenge of how do we influence consumers so far back, and it was tricky. So it was like, hey, we need to do it ourselves, kind of thing. And we went to work, and Real Mushrooms is here 6 years later. But it was all founded from the very beginning on just education. And I was, on Reddit forums talking to people about mushrooms before I even had a product. And it was like, and it was all just giving out free info, helping people. And then eventually it'd be like, well, which product should we get or whatever. But it just started with giving out info. And that's kind of what we've been trying to do ever since then. And that's, one of our kind of core mission statements is just education. So we're always trying to put out info, kind of learning more about certain things. Is there more compounds that we can test for? Is there more ways that we can validate our products? What are all the different markers that we can figure out that just show what we're selling is the real thing? Because the last thing that we want to do is just sell somebody some other random product that is probably not going to help them. And we're taking our products every single day, so it's not like I want it to be good too.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a long road, but long time coming, I guess I would say.
Yeah. So you mentioned that a lot of products out there, and your website talks about this as well, is just fillers and grain and mycelium, and not what is actually listed on the label. Why is that an issue, and why is there no regulation around that?
Yeah, so this really comes back to mushroom growing. So you can grow fresh mushrooms in North America, no problem. You see them at the farmers market, you see them in the grocery stores, but the majority of what you're buying there is water content. So mushrooms are about 90% water. And all of our extract powders start with a dried mushroom. So if you think about, say, like a shiitake mushroom, it sells for, say, $5 a pound, which is, just for math's sake, is maybe $10 a kilo. If you dry that out, now you have 100 grams, and that has to get you $10 a kilo. So now your dried shiitake is actually worth $100 a kilo. And we have extracts that are anywhere from like a 1-to-1 ratio all the way up to like a 16-to-1 ratio, where you can be upwards of a couple $1,000s in raw ingredients. This is just assuming that it's not even organically grown too, based off some of like the USDA growing metrics that they have for how much mushrooms sell for. And you just get to a point where it is much too expensive to grow them for creating supplement ingredients in North America. And so the answer to that is companies are instead growing the root system of the mushroom. So that's called mycelium. This is typically what you do if you wanted to grow mushrooms in the first place. You'll grow the mycelium on some sort of substrate. So you can grow it on grain. Lots of times they'll take that and then they'll put that on straw, and then you'll grow out and you'll get lots of mushrooms. But instead, companies are kind of going back to where they're just growing it on grain. So you have sterilized grain in a bag that gets inoculated with the mycelium. It grows out. It becomes this, if you're familiar with tempeh, it's kind of a white grain log. And then you dry that and you powder that and you sell that as a mushroom supplement when there's no mushrooms involved in the first place. And so the companies will tell you that the mycelium consumes all the grain and what you're left with is mostly mycelium. And my father, he challenged that back in 2015 when he released his white paper, and went and purchased a lot of these products, tested them for beta glucans, which are the primary immunological compounds in mushrooms and mycelium, as well as looked at residual starches. So if there was any grain left over, they would show up in starch content. And what he found was that they were very high in starch, very low in beta glucans, meaning that the majority of what was there was still the grain substrate. And so on top of that, so what my father, he knew this back in probably the 80s, because he worked on a mushroom farm in the 70s. In the early 80s, he started traveling to China. So China is the birthplace of mushroom cultivation. They've been cultivating mushrooms over there for about 800 years now. They've got mushroom institutes that are dedicated to mushroom research. There's, I believe, more mushroom scientists in China than any other country. They're now supplying over 90% of the world's mushrooms. They eat probably more mushrooms per capita than anyone else. Anytime that we're over there, I eat more mushrooms in 2 weeks than I might eat in the rest of the year. You know, every meal there has mushrooms involved in some way. So it's very much ingrained into their diet, as well as traditional Chinese medicine. You look at like the Ben Sao Jing, where you have reishi in there as like a very prized medicinal herb. And so my father started going to China and making contacts in the late 80s, early 90s. And he wanted to be organically grown. So he brought the first organic certifiers over there and helped set up the first organic growers. And so now there's a very robust organic supply chain in China for growing these mushrooms at scale. Scale is like another big thing, so that you can reach costs that are affordable for everyday consumers. And so that was kind of one of the big education pieces. Going back to education is, you know, talking about where these mushrooms are from, because, you know, we're very open that our mushrooms come from China. And we embrace that as opposed to trying to hide from it, and go into all the details that we take and kind of precautionary measures that we take to make sure that, you know, we're testing for heavy metals and pesticides, microbiological contamination, DNA verification, all kinds of stuff there. And then, of course, making sure that the active compounds that you want are actually present and we don't have any fillers and things along those lines. So it's very complicated when trying to explain it. And there's certainly a lot of nuance involved. But yeah, so a lot of it comes back to the economics of mushroom growing. And just if you want to produce something locally, it's going to be kind of mycelium grown on grain, and most of that ends up being grain. And so there was I think it was 2016, the US Pharmacopoeia published a report on reishi, where they found that 74% of the samples that they tested were not authentic to the reishi mushroom. And then in 2000, I think it was 19, Consumer Lab put out a report on reishi products as well. Their standards were, I'd say, quite low compared to what I would have set. But there was one product that they couldn't approve because, one, it was made from mycelium and it said mushroom on the package. And it also had photos of the mushroom on the package and said it would lead the consumer to believe that there was mushrooms in there. They also said that the product was mostly starch after they tested it. So it was mostly the substrate that the mycelium grows on. And so this is kind of a lot that comes back to packaging and terminology and things that, I don't know, are somewhat boring, but really matter when consumers are picking up products, because there's a lot of companies that are just using the term mushroom ubiquitously. I read an article the other day kind of talking about the whole mushroom versus mycelium debate. And they mentioned one brand who was very pro mycelium. I had never heard of them before, so I went and checked out their website. Couldn't find a single mention of mycelium on the website. All I saw was mushroom, 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 multiple photos of mushrooms, and yet their products don't have any of that in there. So if people want to sell mycelium, I'm totally fine with that, but just, embrace it and say it what it is. And even, I mean, there is, so in China, they grow lots of mycelium, but they grow that in a liquid. So you can grow mycelium in a liquid instead of a solid substrate. So think of like tofu. You get a package of tofu, it's in kind of this water, be something like that. So you can basically grow mycelium in a liquid broth. And eventually at the end of the process, you drain off the liquid, you have pure mycelium. And so I detailed this recently. So where there is a large body of mycelium research, but the majority of it is based off when you grow the mycelium in a liquid. So you have pure mycelium to work with. So products like Cordyceps CS4. So this is a Chinese product that was developed in the 80s when they were trying to cultivate the caterpillar fungus. You also have PSK and PSP, which are from turkey tail mycelium that are approved, adjunct therapy products for cancer. So these are out of Japan and China. There's other ones like AHCC, which I believe is out of Japan as well, which is derived from shiitake mycelium. And so lots of these they're growing the mycelium in liquid culture, and then they're purifying it another step on top of that. So in the case of say like a PSP or a PSK, it becomes more drug-like than say like an actual supplement in that case. And there's a lot of stuff when you really dive into like research and how it gets used, but everything for us kind of comes back to the education side of things and trying to just open these doors for people and give them the information that they need to, make their own conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, it was a little bit long.
No, that was a great answer. And if people are looking to experiment with real 100% organic mushrooms, they know where to look, and that is on your website, realmushrooms.com. And I have a bunch of your products here. A big user and fan. My favorite is the Cordyceps M. Like I find it helps my jujitsu practice like crazy. I could roll forever. Yeah, like I don't even do rounds anymore. I just feel like I have unlimited endurance.
Oh, that's crazy.
So I love the Cordyceps M, but I also take the chaga, the reishi, 415, the lion's mane, the tremella, and I love using the Five Defenders powder like a tea. That's the tea I've been drinking here.
Oh, no way.
With some lion's mane, and I'm also excited to try the Ergothioneine and the D+, but those are currently not available on Amazon. Me being from Canada,
right? All
these products are available on Amazon.ca for the most part. Your newer ones are still being shipped out of the States for any listeners in the States through your website. So hopefully those come to Amazon.ca or Amazon.com.
Yeah, I think most of them should be on Amazon.ca pretty soon. We're just waiting for our Health Canada natural product number for the D2Z. Everything else we've gotten approval for.
Right on.
That's a piece that always kind of sets us back a little ways.
Yeah, but you could also, for Canadians listening, you could also order from realmushrooms.com, and first-time orders 25% off if you sign up there for that coupon list. And I didn't have any issues with it crossing the border, but just to be safe, nice. I like to just order from Amazon.ca, so there's no issues at customs.
Yeah.
And I know Bianca over there, she has her Five Defenders and her lion's mane. Those are the products that she's enjoying right now. How about yourself? Skye? Out of all your wide range of products, what is your favorite? What is your go-to? Although I'm sure you take them all.
Yeah, it definitely kind of depends what's in the cabinet, but I usually try and take Five Defenders probably, or like a turkey tail or reishi would probably be my top three. Oh, lion's mane, I probably mix in there a bunch too. And then that'll be thrown in my coffee in the morning. And then around after breakfast, I'll take a Ergo and just a single D2Z, and then maybe add some extra vitamin D with that. That's kind of my daily ritual for the most part. I don't take too much later in the day, but sometimes maybe like a later evening reishi if I want to get like a really good sleep, and maybe pair that with like some magnesium. I like magnesium before bed. Yeah,
that's that combo I actually use. I use the reishi with some magnesium at night, and I've been sleeping really well since starting that routine.
I really like the magnesium. I find that helps me like a ton for sleep.
Yeah. So what future products do you have in mind, or you guys are kind of set with what you have going on now, or is there anything? I know you just came out with the Ergothioneine and the D plus and the zinc. Is there anything else in the shotgun to come out?
Yeah, we've actually got a mushroom and herb line coming out pretty soon. I think, who knows, depending on when this gets released, we might have our first product out. So it'll be herbs plus other mushrooms. So could be ashwagandha, ginseng, rhodiola, bacopa, a bunch of different stuff. We've got a really amazing formulator who's been putting together some really cool blends for specific things. So we have one coming out for like kind of focus and clarity. We've got another one coming out for energy, another relaxation, kind of sleep one. So these all should be out by the end of the year, I think. There's definitely a lot in the pipeline. We just put out our hot chocolate. So that we're super excited about. It's really tasty and really good. There's a couple others food style products that we're thinking about, as well as we're looking into the pet space as well right now. So we do have a lot of veterinarians that use the products for pets. So that's definitely been on our radar, and then we're trying to figure out if there's something in that space that we can help out with a bit more. So there's certainly some opportunities there for adding some mushroom themed chews or powders and something along those lines.
Yeah, with so many different strains of mushrooms out there, like there's just so many. How do you not oversaturate your product line?
Yeah, I know, completely. I mean, we were looking at a maitake product. It's still on our radar, but then it's always like comes back to like, what is it for? And it's always like, oh yeah, it's for your immune system. And then we have, two other products that are specifically geared for immune systems. So for some people, it's preference where they've either been recommended by a practitioner of like, oh, you need maitake or you need reishi or you need turkey tail for usually something immune system related or keeping their immune system boosted while they might be going through chemo or something along those lines. But it's certainly, it can get tough as you like go down. I mean, we launched, I think, Tremella this year, or end of last year, and that's gotten really good reviews. A couple of people on our team just love it and say they notice a serious difference in like skin and hair. And so that's been cool because I've, just heard you hear the inclinations, you read the studies, but you don't really know how it plays out. And it's interesting because each person seems to get affected differently. So someone could take reishi at night because they, want it to help them relax and go to sleep. And they're like, yeah, it really gives me a good night's rest. And someone else would be like, oh man, that just keeps me up all night. And you have these two polar opposite effects. And I think a lot of it comes back to, where people's either immune systems are at, or maybe their gut health, or it could even be genetics or even like the environments that they're in, whether it's, mental stressors or actual environmental stressors of pollution or who knows what. But there's so many different things that are kind of impacting and interacting with our bodies at any given point that it's always hard when someone asks me, oh, like which mushroom should I take for X? And I'm always kind of just try it and see what happens. And for some people it doesn't work, and for other people it does. So it seems like for the people where it works, they get hooked, and other people just kind of move on. And so
yeah, can we talk a bit about that? So about the efficiency of it working. From what I researched, the best effects is when you take the product for a prolonged period of time. Like the effects aren't going to just happen like that generally. So can you kind of talk about that, about how it's something that you need to have kind of sustained use of the product?
Yeah, so these are definitely a long-term approach for health, unless you're working with a practitioner who is using a higher dose for something very specific. And it's kind of not, I don't know, it's not going to be something that you're really going to feel like. That's not something where I'm like, oh wow, I'm totally feeling this right now, unless we get into like the psychedelic stuff where it's like, okay, yeah, it's doing something. But for these mushrooms, it's like, for the most part, you're probably not going to feel much. And that's always tough when you have products, because it's like, do you know it's working? Like, I didn't get sick this year. Was it the mushrooms? I don't know. It could have been, but it's certainly a good indicator. But I don't have concrete evidence that it was. But if if it helped to keep my immune system more robust and more able to react to everything that it's going through on a daily basis, then yes. But yeah, so we recommend, at least kind of 3 months use. I know some practitioners will say to like change up the mushroom every maybe 90 days. I've seen it where, you can take it continually. There's no sort of tolerance that you build up or anything like that. And for me, like, I just tell people to get more mushrooms into your system regardless. I mean, you could take a supplement, you could just eat mushrooms as a food every day. Like, there's nuance around extraction and making sure, we get better access to the compounds. But if you like eating mushrooms and don't like taking a supplement, then just do that. There's decent evidence where just mushroom consumption will give you benefits too. So they are like really good in kind of insoluble fibers too. So really good for feeding your gut. Just a great food all around. So whatever your preference is, and kind of mix and match to, your own individuality, I think.
So yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
wondering about, so I have for idea that all the mushroom supplements that we can purchase, they have in common that they're adaptogens. So they kind of, does that mean that whoever takes them, it brings them back to a state of homeostasis? Is that the idea, kind of centered?
Yeah. So adaptogens, so they could be herbs, they could be mushrooms. There's a lot of things that fall into that category, but the idea is that it can pull us in a variety of different ways. So when I describe mushrooms at times, like I was saying with reishi, where you can have kind of polar opposite effects. So with them being immunomodulators, say if somebody's getting sick and they take mushrooms, sickness, it's usually going to suppress your immune system. So that's going to help kind of bring it back up. But say you have, I don't know, allergies or something like that, which is like an overstimulation of your immune system, it can kind of do the opposite and rein that back in. And so that's the modulating effect. And that's kind of what makes them adaptogenic.
Oh, yeah.
So while you currently don't offer this in your product line, and you may not, and this may not be in the future of Real Mushrooms, I'd like to take a moment to talk about psychedelic mushrooms and what are your insights on that part of the industry, where there's a lot of positive research coming in that field. MAPS and MAPS Canada, Michael Pollan in his book, a lot of really beneficial results that I'm hearing. So what is your insight? What are you hearing about psychedelics? What's the future for psychedelic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, in Canada and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's really cool to see where it's going, and just, I guess, being pushed into the mainstream now, where it was really, shunned upon for so long, just, I guess, similar in a lot of ways to cannabis. There's just a lot of positive benefits of cannabis in many different ways, and similar for psilocybin, with the new research coming out, whether it's kind of depression or PTSD or, a lot of conditions that they don't really have real treatment for. And then there's certainly, microdosing too, which, is non-psychoactive. And a lot of people are reporting, improved mood, better sleep, more focus, a variety of different things. So I think maybe near term, we'll see what Canada does. I don't know. I know in like the US, they've decriminalized it in a few different states and cities. And some of the research out of Johns Hopkins is looking really promising. And maybe kind of, I think a lot of companies are betting that it's going to follow suit for cannabis in Canada anyways. So there is a lot of startups in the space right now that are trying to figure out some sort of business model around it. And we'll see kind of where it goes. But I think it's certainly promising, and it's nice. I mean, near term, we could have maybe approved practitioners that are doing kind of specific treatment, which would be cool. So I know I do have one friend that is training practitioners for the use of psychedelics. So I think that's really important, that practitioners get exposed to it and understand it and can do these treatments. Because I think a lot of it comes back to, if you are doing sort of bigger doses for certain treatments, that there is that kind of set and setting piece to it, and integration. So working with somebody that can help you through kind of the initial part, as well as kind of post treatment, where you're trying to just integrate who knows what you experienced that you can't explain, or because things can go wrong, and depending, like if you have mental issues, it might be something you'd want to avoid, but definitely having somebody there that you trust, and that can guide you in that, and certainly some sort of therapist, depending upon how you want to reintegrate what you've experienced. And there's tons of good anecdotal evidence, and the new research coming out is all very promising. So let's cross our fingers that it goes in the right direction. So certainly it's an exciting time, and I don't know if we'll do anything there, but we're certainly watching it and keeping our eye, and who knows, not sure what.
So one question I like to ask everyone that I have on this podcast is their advice to a hero on the path, that are feeling a calling in their heart, as you did, to start Real Mushrooms. And there could have been I'm sure there were so many shoulds that came to, well, I should just stick with my my computer degree, should stick with what I was doing before, should stay with the safe route. Starting a new business is tough. So what advice would you give to someone on that same path where you were, right before you started Real Mushrooms and took that leap of faith?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, I would say. In many ways, I want to say I had it easy, just having my dad there, and having like a really good mentor. And maybe that's part of it, is whatever area that you are wanting to pursue, to try and find mentors, because that is an amazing resource, and having like a really good network too. So it's like I have business groups that I'm in as well, that are across different industries, that can help me with just about anything related to, and that goes like personally as well, of just very well educated people in many different areas that you can draw on to do that. But in terms of pursuing, yeah, it's tricky and it's challenging, and it's hard to give advice on that. Sometimes it's like you really want to just kind of stick to your current path, and I feel like even for myself, I've always got the voices in my head going of the what ifs, and should I do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, I guess certainly a lot of people kind of say to like do what you love, and that can work for a lot of people, but getting to a place where, yeah, I mean, there's so many different paths to getting what you're looking for, I think, and that there's no single answer. Whereas like I guess like Derek, for your example, like working with your programs where you're working with kids, and like maybe somebody else decides to build a big business and sell it, and then after that they're going to take their money and do philanthropy stuff or something like that, and bring a lot of good that way. Whereas it's I guess there's it's just like so many ways to skin a cat kind of thing, like there's so many different pathways and journeys. But I guess continuing to just ask questions and look internally of, is this what you want to do? And is this making you happy? And do you want to pursue this for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? So, and being honest with yourself, so that, because that is really hard, it's easy to lie to yourself, and ignore those voices. So yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I'm not one for, it's tough to give advice like that. I don't know. I want to say something really profound, but there's going to be, ups and downs too. I think, we don't hear about a lot of the failures, I guess, and certainly in this day and age, we always see the wins and the successes and stuff getting over exaggerated. And it's like, the last business entity that I had failed. It, fell apart. I lost friends. But in many ways, I see that as a success of, setting me up for Real Mushrooms. So would I have changed anything with that? I don't know. It's always tough, but certainly just keep asking good questions and make sure you have a support group around you to make you a better person as a whole, I think.
Well, that was beautifully said.
Like,
Yeah.
there's some nuggets in there, I hope.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of profoundness also in recognizing that there's not just one path. There's so many ways that we can give service, and there's no right or wrong always.
Completely. Yeah.
We definitely tend to think that, like, am I doing the right choice? But yeah, that I see a lot of value in what you shared. Thanks.
Yeah. And I guess just different ways. I guess like people might see that there's only one solution for, whatever it is that they want to do, of that maybe they have to quit their job in order to do this, but maybe they don't. Maybe they can do something on the side. Maybe it's kind of like if it's just like your job and you're enjoying it or something along those lines. It's like there's many different ways that you can get to where you want to be without, having to make huge decisions or drastic moves, or there's a lot of trial and error I think you can do beforehand to really solidify your decisions before having to make jump into a lot of unknowns, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that, Skye. And this brings us to the final two questions that I ask every guest on this on these episodes. And so the first question is in 3 words. How would you describe the experience you're having on this earth?
Oh. How am I describing the experience I have on this earth? Wow. I guess fun and learning.
Fun, learning.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Fun, learning, and maybe experience.
Beautiful. And then that takes us to the final question. And we played around with time. We revisited your past. And now I'm going to play around with time again. I'm going to bring us into the future. And we're going to be alongside an 85-year-old Skye. Who is that 85-year-old Skye? Where are you? Who are you surrounded by? What does your life look like? And what is the legacy that you've left on this planet?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot to that. Yeah, I guess I would hope that I would be surrounded by friends and family, have a very close community. I think, a lot of longevity stuff comes back to having a very strong community. I would love to still be mobile, sort of, I guess, I'm trying to remember what the word for it is, but basically still being able, cognitive functioning, somewhat, still healthy, decent shape, have, family and friends nearby. I would hope that more people are eating mushrooms. We'll see about that. That's still to come, but I would love it if, it was mushrooms were a bigger thing and mushrooms were more of part of people's food. And I think just a lot more knowledge around mushrooms too. I think, there's too much, maybe a lot of people are still scared of mushrooms and don't really fully understand them. So I think there's a lot of learning to be done there, and hopefully I can be a part of that. But as long as I think I'm happy with surrounded by family and friends, I think that would be enough for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I want you to stay with this 85-year-old Skye just for a moment longer. Take a breath in and really feel this Skye in your being. And I'm going to bring us back to the present, the infinite now. And this 85-year-old Skye, he sends current day Skye a message. What does he whisper in your ear?
Wow. I think about that going backwards too. And I think it, a lot of it comes back to taking more risk. Things usually aren't permanent. You know, there's usually just kind of like, there's many paths, like we were saying. And so I know from me looking backwards is definitely like, yeah, while it's very hard in the moment, usually it's not as bad as you think it is. And to put yourself out there more, you know, take more risks, ask more questions, and I think just go and get it, you know, like, you know what you need to do, and just do it.
Hell yeah. I'm with that 85-year-old Skye's advice. That's a wise 85-year-old man. That's a wise current Skye right now as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for all the wisdom you shared on this episode and for joining us. It's been a pleasure. We want to be respectful of your time, so we'll leave it at this. They could find you at Realmushrooms, real_mushrooms on Instagram. They could check out www.realmushrooms.com, which links to your YouTube and all your great blog articles, all your products. They could find your products in Canada on Amazon.ca, and in the States, they can get it from your site directly or also on Amazon.com. Anything I left out there, Skye?
No, it's pretty good. I'd just say, like, learn more about mushrooms and figure out a way to like eat more mushrooms. And this has been a really great talk. So thank you, Derek and Bianca. It was a ton of fun.
Thank you. To close every episode, we bring our fist in for a fist bump
Awesome.
in the winner's circle, the choice that we can all make. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.